our scientific work and mostly about its implication and application to drug development, I will be happy to answer. So let me talk about the revolution of personalized medicine and whether it is at all revolution or just a technological leap. We'll talk about it. So this is the city of Haifa, as many of you know, and the medical school is here, just next to the biggest hospital in the northern part of Israel, the Rambam, the Maimonides Hospital. And the city is also a place where the Baha'i people chose to build a world center, partially in Haifa, partially in a city that is north of Haifa, Akko, where they buried the founder and the prophet and built the beautiful temple and gardens that have become UNESCO heritage site. So let's talk a little bit about something that we are not thinking about, but it's a very exciting fact, and that's lifespan. So we are now living on the average in developed countries about 80 to 85 years, women a little bit more, men a little bit less. But this was not the case merely less than 100 years ago. At the turn of the 20th century, people were living on the average 50 to 55 years. Women died during delivery, farmers died in the farm because of infectious diseases, tetanus, many other infectious diseases. And if we are going back even farther, let's go to the old Egyptian time, Greek time, Roman time, 4,000 years ago, the average lifespan was about 30 years. So it took about 4,000 years to expand lifespan by around 20 years, and then one single century, 100 years, which is 2.5% of the time, to add additional 30 to 35 years. So something amazing was happening in the 20th century, and this amazing something is basically science and technology. It's antibiotics and vaccination, imaging, X-ray. Basically, the first Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to Konrad Röntgen, the founder of the first imaging technology in 1901. And it's also understanding better life, diet, cholesterol, exercise, clean water at home, food industry, all these technologies together added about 35 years to our life, which is truly amazing if we think about it. Now, the immediate question that comes after learning this number is whether the trend is going to continue and at what pace. Is it going to slow down? Is it going to accelerate? Are we going to keep it linear? And then what is the price that we are paying for the privilege of living longer? So whether the trend is going to continue, the data tell us that yes, we are adding few weeks every year to our lifespan. And the only country in the world, actually, except for really exceptional countries, in which we are seeing a decrease in lifespan is surprisingly the neighbor of Mexico from the north, the United States of America. In the United States of America, lifespan is going down because of two main reasons. One is violence, and the other one is opioid addiction, or addiction to many other drugs. Amazing, so the most developed country in the world is going down. Now, what about going up? There was an interesting paper in Nature 2 years ago that predicted that lifespan is going to plateau at around 115 years, around that number. There are already people, the centenarians, that are approaching this number, which is amazing, and you can find quite many of them. And whether it's true or not, we don't know. There were many predictions in the paper about mutation burden, sustainability of different systems in the body. I don't want to go into all the deliberations in the paper, which was extremely interesting. But meanwhile, new technologies are coming up. CRISPR, gene editing, we are able to correct gene. It's still under a heavy bioethical debate. I'm going to touch about on it briefly. So we really don't know. We cannot predict, but it looks like the ability of our tissues and our systems to sustain life is coming to a plateau at around the age of 100 years. For many other reasons that I don't have the time to go into. Now, what is the price that we are paying for it? And forget about the price in dollars or pesos. Let's talk about the price of what we are seeing now in modern medicine. Basically, all the three main killers of the Western world are attributed to the long life that we are so much enjoying. Heart diseases, think about, we don't see people that are dying of myocardial infarction or other degenerative vascular diseases at the age of 30 or 40. Yes, we do see from time to time marathon runners or football players that are collapsing dead during the game, but this is very rare. We are seeing an increase, steep increase in heart diseases and vascular diseases at the 5th, 6th, 7th decade of life. Big killer. Cancer. Cancer is number one killer in the Western world, in Israel for sure. It's number one and followed only by heart diseases. We don't see cancer at the young age. I happen to be the president of the Israel Cancer Society. Cancer at an early age of life is about 2.5% to 3% of all cases. True, it's tragic. The son of the neighbors, God forbid, contracted cancer, mostly blood cancers or brain cancer, but the numbers are very low. As I said, 2.5% to 3% of all cases. Cancer is bona fide age-dependent disease. Again, seeing it increasing in steep rate at the 5th, 6th, 7th decade of life. And then brain diseases. I'm not talking only on vascular diseases, analgesic drug to relieve pain, but very quickly it was discovered that it has also an anti-inflammatory properties. And I'll come to this point in a minute. Later on, towards the end of the 20th century, its anticoagulation properties were discovered. So aspirin can also prevent blood coagulation, and of course it became the drug of choice for patients that suffered from myocardial infarction. And as you all know, in myocardial infarction, there is coagulation of blood in the coronary arteries that lead blood to the heart muscle itself. And then the story of inflammation came back because people discovered what was known already or was predicted by Paul Ehrlich at the turn of the century, that there is a linkage between chronic inflammation and cancer. We are kind of blind to it for many years, but people that suffer chronic inflammation, mostly subtle under the radar inflammation in breast, in prostate, mostly in the colorectal system, at the end, because of the constant stimulation of the tissue, develop also malignant transformation of the tissue. And people surmise that if aspirin is anti-inflammatory, let's use it as a chemopreventive drug to prevent conversion of the inflammation into malignant cells, into malignant tumor. And indeed, for patients with a family history, mostly of colorectal, people that suffer from adenomatosis, from multiple polyps in the colorectal system, aspirin was prescribed as chemopreventive, and the success was beyond expectation. About other cancer, it's still under discussion, but aspirin became widely used as a chemopreventive drug. Again, I wanted to tell you the story because not a penny almost was invested compared to billions of dollars that are required nowadays in order to develop a new drug from the bench all the way to the patient bed. Another example of serendipity was the first antibiotic, penicillin. Sir Alexander Fleming, the British microbiologist, noted by chance it was a mistake in an experiment that he was a microbiologist, and here you can see the Petri dish with the white smear of the bacteria, and he left a Petri dish open on the table in his laboratory for over the weekend, and a spore of a fungus fell over the nutritious media on this dish and grew along the weekend. You can see the white spot of this fungus, and what Alexander Fleming noted, and here is the difference between a good scientist and a less good scientist. He had a very sharp eye, and he noted a halo here between the bacterial culture in the colony of the fungus, and he surmised that the fungus is secreting a material that he called antibiotics, anti against bios life. He was not a chemist, and it took another more than a decade for Sir Ernst Chain and Howard Florey to purify the material. Penicillin came to the market and was used first during World War II, saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of wounded soldiers from the Allies. But the principle that fungi secrete an antibiotic material scattered very quickly, and then Selman Waxman in Rutgers University developed streptomycin that was secreted by Streptomyces, and the world has changed forever since then. Again, a serendipity. But serendipity is not good enough to develop drugs, and a new era came, and that's the era of screening of libraries of chemicals, and this era reflects the development of two technologies that came developed independently. On one hand, synthetic organic chemistry with the synthesis of millions of compounds on the way to final products as intermediate or final product on one hand, and on the other hand, the ability to model diseases, mostly in tissue culture. You walk into any laboratory of biology these days, and you will find different cells that are growing in the incubator reflecting numerous diseases. That it be cancer cells that secrete cholesterol, and so on and so forth. Of course, not all diseases can be imitated faithfully in the tissue culture, but then animal models were developed, and of course, we still have a problem because the ultimate target is the human being. But nevertheless, these two technologies married together, and people developed screening without having even any mechanism in mind, just trying one chemical after another to see whether they have an effect, in the case of cancer, on cell division rate. Many drugs were developed, all the kinase inhibitor that we are using now very successfully to treat numerous cancers were developed using this technology. And one drug, of course, was also developed by this technology, statins, which are inhibiting cholesterol biosynthesis and also save the lives and inhibited the morbidity and mortality of millions of people worldwide, developed by Akira Endo, a pharmacologist in a pharmaceutical company in Japan that screened a library of natural products in Japan coming from different plants, mostly from pines. And he discovered one compound that inhibited the biosynthesis of cholesterol. Now we know that it inhibits the first enzyme along the biosynthetic pathway, which is HMG-CoA reductase, and a big blockbuster came to the world, now a blockbuster in billions of dollars. The current sales of statins, the yearly current sales of statins reach on the average now $40 billion a year. It's a very, very successful drug. But again, screening is not good enough. Why? Because the model is not good enough. Cells are not human beings, and human beings are very complicated. There are not two human beings that are walking on the face of Earth that are identical to one another, even not identical twins. They are different epigenetically. So here we are, and therefore no wonder, though we haven't thought about it, that the same very disease that we thought is identical and can be treated similarly in all patients that are presenting themselves with the disease, they behave differently. You know, a tumor in the breast, in the prostate, Alzheimer's disease, in each patient they behave differently. And therefore, there was a need to change the whole approach. And people noted that the patients, you know, when you have a group of patients, even they have a similar disease, let's say prostate cancer, and you send them on day one to the gold standard treatment, after a period of time they diverge. Some of them are cured, some improve but not cured, some carry on chronic disease, some deteriorate, some die. They behave differently. And the problem was that we could not predict who will behave a certain way. And this was a very bothering issue for both physicians and mostly for patients, that they didn't know the fate. And the answer of the doctor, you know, when a patient asks the doctor, "Doctor, am I going to survive and how am I going to survive the disease?" was always 50%, 20%, 10%, one side, the other side, and the question was, doctor, how do you know? And the doctor said, listen, I'm 70 years old, I've been sitting in this clinic for 4 decades, I've seen 2,000 patients like you, and I've read all the literature, and that's what the statistics is telling me. Statistics is not, it's a very valid scientific tool, but not good enough for us. And meanwhile, technology came to our help, and this was the beginning of the story by Lee Hood that developed the concept of personalized medicine, that is not only personalized, it's a precise medicine, the term that was coined by President Obama, but it's also predictive, preventive, and participatory. And it's predictive and preventive and participatory for reasons that I'm going to tell you in a minute, and it's all based initially, only initially, on our genetic repertoire or our genetic code. And the development came from the discovery of the DNA, the double helix by Watson and Crick, and then the ability to sequence the DNA. And people said, let's go and sequence the human DNA. The idea came at the early 90s, merely 30 years ago, and there were huge discussions about the price and are we going to be successful. There are 3 billion bases that comprise our DNA, and people say it's impossible and it will take forever. It didn't take forever, but it took a long time, 7 years for the first human genome, $700 million, and it ended up in April of 2000 with a very important paper published in Nature in April of 2000, and people predicted that this is never going to be of any clinical use. The price, the time, now we are in 2019, we can do it in less than $2,000 with a small machine that can sit in the office of every physician. The sequencing moved from chemical reaction of Sanger and Wally Gilbert that won the Nobel Prize for it, to solid-state technology, electronic technology. I will not go into it. The computers have all the software, and it can be done easily. Not nowadays in every office of every doctor, but in every hospital we can do it. We don't need to sequence all the genome in each case, but the technology is still going down in price and in speed. The speed is few hours. So just to give you an example, and all what we need is a buccal smear. We don't need even a sample of blood. You can just take a cotton wool swab, take a buccal smear, extract the DNA, and do it. And that all happened in less than 20 years. Amazing, amazing development. But then we discovered again, to our amazement, that nature is much smarter than we are. The secret is not in the DNA, and the secret is sitting in a much more complex system, because above the DNA sits the RNA, and above the RNAs are sitting 22,000 proteins that play the symphony of life. The DNA is only the code, but it's not the little machines that run it. We are running on our proteins. The fact that I'm standing in front of you and can move my hand is not due to DNA. It's due to a protein, two proteins that are called actin and myosin that are sliding against one another like a cogwheel and can contract the muscle. And the fact that I see you is due to receptors in my retina that are again protein that transmit light signal into the visual cortex at the back of my brain. So, and the protein technology had turned to be much more difficult to crack. I will not go again into the chemistry, but we are now into it. All in all, to cut a very long story short, a whole culture, a whole ecosystem was developed that is sitting under the umbrella that we call omics, and it's genomics, and transcriptomics, and proteomics, and metabolomics. We are looking also into the small molecules, and each is done by different technology. But at the end of the day, we are not now we are moving, but in few years we shall be able to profile each patient exactly according to its all the components and probe directly what is the cause of the disease. Well, this is not the whole story, and let me just coming to try to conclude. I want just to give you, for those of you who are not in the medical world, just to give you an example of breast cancer, how this was developed. And you can see here 2 biopsies on the left lower side, taken from 2 different patients. You can see the tumor tissue on the left side, on the right side, and both tissues were manipulated by the pathologist, trying to stain them with an antibody. You can see that on the left side there is no stain. On the right side you can see a heavy brownish stain. The antibody is an antibody against a mutated estrogen receptor, and this woman is positive to a mutation in the estrogen receptor, and therefore she can be treated with a drug that is called tamoxifen, which is a drug that counteracts the activity of the pathogenic mutated estrogen receptor. For the left woman, it will be no use to give her this drug because it won't be only waste of money, mostly it will be waste of hope, and she will continue to deteriorate. This woman has something else, and the something else can be a mutation in the EGF receptor, or it can be a mutation in the progesterone receptor, or unluckily she can be a triple negative. So this is the worst, because triple negative means we don't know what's on there, but nevertheless she has a tumor. We are on the way to understand what is triple negative, because we are now sequencing, not we, the community, is now sequencing thousands and thousands of patients with breast cancer, with Alzheimer's disease, with stomach cancer, with all the diseases, in order to build a bank that will tell us the story of how the different diseases, what are the causes of the different diseases. And this bank is only the beginning, because for some of the diseases we already have a drug, but for most of them we still don't have a drug. But knowing the reason for the disease will enable us to develop the drug. Because if we know the mutation, we can go to the protein. We can model the mutation in the protein, and then we can develop a chemical that will dock into the mutated protein and will modulate, inhibit, or accelerate its activity. So this is the roadmap. We are at the middle of creating a roadmap to understand the numerous causes that are bringing all of those diseases, and the prediction will be is that just for breast cancer, now we know that there are 4 types, there will be about 15 of them, which has a lot of economic implications once we are going to talk about the pharma companies and how willing they are to go into this issue. So let me go towards the very end of my talk to tell you about the problems that we are facing. I'm not going to enumerate all of them. There are 2 types of problems. One type of problems are technological. Technological problems are, for example, the fact that we were very naive at the time that I was a medical student. We thought about one mutation, one disease. This was the idea. If you have one gene, one disease. This is vastly wrong, and mostly for psychological diseases. Think about the term that we are using today that everybody knows, the autism spectrum. Just one single disease has a whole spectrum of it. So the spectrum means that there are different genes that are the causing gene, and each gene has a role. It depends which gene is more dominant than the other. Even the term dominant and recessive these days receives different interpretations. And many diseases, mostly metabolic diseases, psychological diseases, metabolic diseases, have many genes. So the problem is who is the driver, who is the hitchhiker, who helps the driver, and so on and so forth. So this is one complication. Because if you want to develop a drug, the drug is always aimed, targeting one single protein. Another problem that we learned, unfortunately, and this reminds me of the promise of President Nixon to eradicate cancer. We were talking about eradicating HCV in no time, and to eradicate cancer in 10 years. Actually, the problem with cancer has even worsened since that time. We are not even close to eradicating cancer. Cancer has a nasty property which is called genomic instability. We are all equipped with a wonderful mechanism that is called DNA repair mechanism. We are able to maintain the integrity of our genome. So if there is a mutation because we are exposed to UV irradiation of the sun or to some toxic material, we are able to eliminate the mutation by repairing it, or if we are not able to repair it, by inducing apoptosis, programmed cell death. Cancer patients don't have this property. You are treating the cancer patient, everybody is happy, the family, the patient, the cancer shows signs of regression, but then it comes back in a more aggressive way. Why? Because a new mutation came up. We have pressurized one mutation with one drug, Therefore, there is no way in the world that we should ever treat cancer with one single drug. So this is one reason of the approach, but nevertheless, cancer fools us, and we still don't understand the mechanism of this genomic instability. So I just wanted very briefly to point out to some technological problem, but what really is a much heavier problem, because technology, I think we can handle, is the bioethical issues. And the bioethical issues have came this morning in the talk that we heard from Professor Avanzando about triaging, for example, of multiple casualties in the battlefield, and so on and so forth. And I just pointed it out in the seventh point, which is called bioethical problem of availability of genetic information and the ability to alter it. And it has many facets. It's not just one single problem. It's the problem of genetic privacy. The first test that that patients can expect in the emergency room in the next few years will be sequencing of the DNA. So until now it was some simple biochemical few enzymes in the blood, but in the future it will be much more detailed testing of our genetic repertoire and the results of it. And the results are going to reach much farther than the question for which the patient entered the emergency room to start with. Think about the patient, 60 years old, 70 years old man coming with a chest pain to the emergency room. The first thing to rule out is, of course, myocardial infarction. In 20 years from now, previously, ECG, few enzymes, myocardial infarction can be ruled in or ruled out, or if there is some doubt, the patient was left for surveillance. Nowadays, it will be much more detailed, and the doctor will come back and tell the patient, no, you don't have heart attack, and you can be happy about it, but you have a mutation in a gene that is called APOE4B that carries high susceptibility for Alzheimer's disease. Then what do you do with the information? Think about it. Who is the first one to tell? Your wife. Okay, what about the children that may carry the gene? What about your employer that may fire you? What about your insurance agent that may revoke your insurance? Think about just genetic information. First of all, to whom it belongs. Should we tell the patient only the information that he can benefit from and hide from him or her the information that he cannot or she cannot benefit from? It's a very heavy question, a very heavy question. So, and be prepared for the big genome leak. So the information is not going to stay in a vault in the hospital. For sure, it will leak out. Not only that it will leak out, there will be agencies that will be interested to look into it. Insurance company. Now you tell the insurance company, oh my dad, I'm coming from a healthy family. Oh, we had some cancer case few generations before. No, now they want to know your DNA sequencing. The policies of insurance are going to change. High-risk people will pay much more than low-risk people. Now it's equalized. The insurance companies are working by a simple economic principle. How much money they pay every year for the insurance and how much money they pay for the policies. And it's more or less equalized by some age-dependent parameters and so on. From now on it will be personalized. Think just about that. And then comes again the issue of gene editing. And I'm bringing this case that just came to the literature a few months ago of Jiangqi He from Shenzhen, who edited two babies, Nana and Lulu, to protect them from AIDS in the future. He basically inactivated the CCRX5 receptor that is the receptor by which the virus, the AIDS virus, is entering the cell. Why did he do it? Because the father had AIDS. So he wanted to protect them. Now there are technologies you can deliver children with 100% safety, that even if the mother has AIDS, they will not be infected. So we have the technology. So why to do it? Why to edit the children while we don't know what will be the off-target effect of this editing? And indeed there are already off-target effects because people know about this gene. How do they know about this gene? Because they are people who are very active in sexually, homosexually, and they are protected against AIDS. So people knew already that the mutation in CCXR5 is protecting patients against AIDS. And then a British survey that was just published recently showed that these people that have a mutation in a gene that protect them against a viral entry is also shortening the lifespan. So here this Chinese scientist took 2 babies that have not lived even 1 single day and already shortened their lifespan. So germ cell editing is of heavy discussion nowadays. So again, it all belongs to personalized medicine because we want to treat the patient according to the problem that he presents. These babies have a problem of AIDS in the family, so let's do something about it. That's personal. So personalized medicine is not only fitting the drug to the genetic repertoire of the patient, it's going much wider. So we really need to think about it heavily. And this is beyond the burden of scientists to do. Scientists and physicians can consult about this, but it's a societal issue. It's a much broader societal issue. It's for clergymen, for psychologists, for sociologists, for legislators to deal with these problems, and it's an extremely complicated problem. And I think that Angelina Jolie, that everybody knows her story, exemplifies and epitomizes more than anybody else, at least as a celebrity, the issue of personalized medicine, discovering that her aunt, the sister of her mother, died of ovarian cancer, the mother died of breast cancer. She surmised that she might have a mutation in a gene called BRCA1, breast cancer number 1. And indeed she was found to be a carrier of the gene, and she decided to take a preemptive step, initially to remove her 2 breasts, a summer later, 2013, to remove her 2 ovaries, and also to declare it, to make it public, so other women will go for the screening. She did, again, a great public service, but again, leaving behind, of course, all the problems of the children, the employer, the insurance company, and so on and so forth. And luckily, of course, breast and ovaries, with all the being symbols of womanhood, are removable organs. What about mutations in a gene, in the EGFR gene in the brain, that is a predictor for glioblastoma multiforme, which is a fatal brain tumor with no cure. So you see, we are still very much behind, but on the other hand, I think that we are entering an extremely exciting era in medicine, extremely exciting, where medicine is going to be much more precise with much less side effects. And the question of accessibility, which is another ethical issue of patients to this modern technology. You just heard from 2 experts, one from Mexico and one from Israel. What are the shortcomings of the medical system in beds, in manpower, and this is going to be very sophisticated to explain to the patients, to get their consent to what's going on. And therefore, the 4 Ps that Lee Hood coined, the personal and precise, the predictive and therefore preventive, but mostly the participatory, is extremely important, because from now on, the patient is going or must go to become an important part in the decision-making process about his or her own fate. The days that the doctor is the God and forget about asking a question and just do what you are being taught to do are gone forever. The doctor, the physician, the scientist are going to be only consulted. Decisions about operation like Angelina Jolie has undergone must be taken by fully understanding the problem by the patient, him or herself. Thank you very much.